The stagecoach rattled down the dusty trail, stirring up a haze of grit in the golden afternoon sun. Inside, Mary Collins sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, clutching the small cloth bundle that held all she owned. The black crepe at her sleeve was still crisp, though it had been a year since she buried her husband. She was young, too young to be widowed, but life rarely gave second chances to women like her. She pressed her lips together, whispering a prayer under her breath. "Lord, guide my steps. I only want a chance to work, to be useful. Please let this be the place." The coach jolted to a stop before a long stretch of white fencing and a sprawling ranch house with wide porches. The driver swung down and tipped his hat. "This is it, ma'am. The Granger place." Mary gathered her bundle and stepped down. Before her stood a grand ranch, acres of pasture rolling behind it, and barns sturdy and new. She had been told the owner, Mr. Luke Granger, was one of the wealthiest ranchers in the county, but also one of the loneliest. He'd lost his wife 3 years ago, and though the town respected him, folks whispered that he had grown colder with the years. Mary squared her shoulders. She wasn't here for gossip or grand dreams. She was here to offer her hands, her cooking, and her prayers for steady work. The door creaked open, and a tall man stepped out. He wore a dark vest and work shirt, his hat pulled low over steel-gray eyes. His presence was commanding, the kind that filled the porch before a word was spoken. "Mrs. Collins?" he asked, his voice deep, rough as gravel. "Yes, sir." "Mary Collins." She lowered her gaze politely. "I came to see if you might be needing a cook. I can make hearty meals, stretch supplies when they run short, and I've been told my bread rises light every time." For a long moment, Luke said nothing. His eyes swept over her, not in judgment, but in the way a man measures whether someone belongs. He wasn't used to strangers on his land, especially women. Finally, he nodded. "The men are tired of beans and jerky. You can try supper tonight. If they eat without complaint, we'll talk about staying on." Mary released the breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Yes, sir. I'll do my best." She followed him inside, taking in the large but lifeless home. Dust clung to corners, and the air smelled of disuse, save for the faint scent of leather and wood smoke. The kitchen was serviceable but neglected, the pantry half-stocked. Mary rolled up her sleeves without hesitation. She kneaded dough, chopped vegetables, and set a pot of stew simmering over the stove. By the time the ranch hands filed in for supper, the table was spread with steaming bread, roasted chicken, and rich gravy. The men ate heartily, some even grinning with relief at the sight of real food. Luke sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable, though his bowl emptied faster than most. When the meal ended, he leaned back, folding his arms. "You can cook," he said simply. Mary offered a small smile. "Thank you, sir." But before Luke could say more, the soft patter of small footsteps echoed in the hall. A little girl, no more than 6, peeked into the dining room. Her dark curls framed a delicate face, and her big brown eyes, so like Luke's, searched the table. "Papa," she whispered, holding a ragged doll in her arms. Luke's stern features softened at once. He pushed back his chair and held out a hand. "Annie, you should be in bed." The girl's gaze shifted to Mary, curiosity lighting her eyes. She edged closer, tugging at her father's sleeve. "Papa, is she gonna stay?" Luke hesitated, but Mary knelt down, lowering herself to the child's height. "Hello, Annie," she said gently. "I'm Mary. I came to help cook and keep the kitchen tidy." Annie studied her for a long moment, then leaned in close, her voice a small whisper. "Can she tuck me in too?" Mary's heart caught in her throat. She glanced up at Luke, whose eyes betrayed a flicker of something unguarded, loss, longing, and maybe a trace of hope. Mary reached out, smoothing the child's hair with a tender hand. "If your papa says it's all right," she said softly, "I'd be honored to." Luke cleared his throat, his usual steady voice rougher than before. "One night won't hurt." And as Mary followed Annie down the hall, hearing the little girl chatter about her doll and her room, she felt something stir deep within her chest, something she had not dared to feel in a long time. Perhaps she had come only to cook. But maybe, just maybe, God had brought her here for more. The night Mary tucked Annie into bed was one she would not soon forget. The little girl's room was simple but tidy, with a small wooden bed and a quilt clearly stitched by loving hands long ago. Mary smoothed the blanket over Annie's shoulders and listened as the child whispered about how her mama used to sing. "Would you like me to sing something soft?" Mary asked gently. Annie's sleepy eyes lit up, and she nodded. So Mary sang the only lullaby she knew, one her own mother had hummed when life was hard and nights were long. Her voice was low, unpolished, but warm enough to hush Annie's restless wiggles. By the time the last note faded, the little girl was fast asleep, clutching her doll tight. Mary lingered by the bedside for a moment, her heart aching with tenderness. It had been so long since anyone had needed her in this way, not just for cooking or keeping house, but for comfort, for love. When she turned, she found Luke leaning silently in the doorway. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly, though there was no anger in his tone. "I know," Mary whispered. "But sometimes a child just needs a woman's touch. She misses her mother." His jaw tightened, and for a moment, Mary feared she had overstepped. But then Luke nodded slowly. "Annie doesn't take to folks easy. You're the first stranger she's let near her bed since her ma passed." The weight of his words pressed on Mary's chest. She gave him a small, respectful nod and slipped past him into the hall. The following days settled into a rhythm. Mary rose before dawn, her hands busy with bread dough and coffee pots. She cooked for the ranch hands, mended their shirts when needed, and kept the kitchen filled with the scent of pies cooling on the windowsill. But it wasn't only the men who grew fond of her cooking. Annie began appearing in the kitchen, trailing after Mary like a shadow. She would sit on a stool, swinging her legs while Mary worked, asking endless questions. "Why do you braid your hair like that? Does it hurt when you knead bread? Did your mama teach you how to sew? Can I help?" At first, Mary gave gentle, short answers. But as the days passed, she found herself smiling more, laughing even, as the child's chatter filled the empty spaces of the house. Luke noticed. He often came in from the fields to find his daughter dusted with flour, proudly holding a lopsided biscuit or tugging at Mary's skirts for attention. At first, he wanted to scold Annie for being underfoot, but something in Mary's patient way stopped him. Instead, he found himself watching them, Mary with her sleeves rolled, humming as she worked, Annie's laughter ringing bright, and a strange warmth stirred in his chest. It had been years since this house had known laughter. Years since it had smelled of more than smoke and leather. One evening, after supper, Mary was washing dishes when Luke lingered in the kitchen. He leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed, studying her. "You work hard," he said at last. She glanced up, surprised. "I was raised that way. Hard work keeps the heart steady." He tilted his head slightly. "But you don't just work. You care. For Annie. For the men." Mary set down the dish towel, unsure how to respond. "I only do what I can, Mr. Granger. It's no trouble." His gaze softened. "Luke. Call me Luke." Her heart gave a small, unexpected jolt. "Luke," she repeated quietly, tasting the name. For a moment, their eyes held, and something unspoken stretched between them. But before either could say more, Annie burst in with her doll, dragging them both back into the simple reality of family life. As the weeks turned into months, Mary became more than a cook. She became the heartbeat of the ranch house. She mended Annie's dresses, taught her simple songs, and brushed her curls at night. She stitched curtains for the bare windows and planted herbs outside the kitchen door. The men teased that she had tamed the ranch better than a dozen hired hands. Luke, however, wrestled with feelings he hadn't expected. He had hired her out of practicality, but her presence stirred something dangerous in a man who had locked his heart away. She was gentle, steady and strong. And worse, he could see how Annie clung to her, how she blossomed under her care. But what if Mary left? What if she found another life, another man? Could Annie's heart bear another loss? One evening, as the sun dipped low, Luke found Mary hanging laundry on the line. The breeze tugged at her hair, and the fading light set her face aglow. "I owe you more than wages," he said suddenly, startling her. She looked up, puzzled. "I don't understand." "You've given Annie something I couldn't. You've given her back laughter." He paused, his throat working. "You've given me something too. Hope." Mary's breath caught. For months, she had kept her heart guarded, reminding herself this was only work. But hearing those words, seeing the earnestness in his eyes, she felt her walls tremble. "Luke," she began softly, but words failed. Before she could find them, Annie came running across the yard, her curls bouncing. She grabbed Mary's hand and tugged. "Papa, can Mary read me my story tonight?" Luke looked at Mary, then at his daughter. And in that moment, he realized the truth. They already needed her. Not just as a cook. Not just as a helper. But as part of them. Weeks later, after Sunday service in town, Luke finally spoke what had been pressing on his heart. He walked Mary out beneath the shade of the churchyard tree, where Annie chased butterflies nearby. His hat was in his hands, his voice low and rough. "Mary, I don't reckon I know the right way to say this, but I can't picture this place without you anymore. Annie can't. I can't. I don't just want you to cook for us. I want you to stay, as my wife." Mary froze, her heart thundering. She had told herself she would never marry again, never risk loving only to lose. But here was a man offering not just himself, but a family, a home, a place where her heart could heal. Tears filled her eyes. "Luke, are you certain? You've lived with loss. So have I. What if?" He reached for her hands, his grip steady, his gaze unwavering. "Then we'll face it together. I'd rather have one more chance at love than a lifetime of empty days." Mary's breath trembled, but a smile broke through her tears. "Yes, Luke. I'll stay." A delighted squeal rang out as Annie ran up, having heard the words. She threw her arms around Mary's waist. "Does that mean you'll be my mama now?" Mary gathered her close, her tears spilling freely. "Yes, sweetheart. If you'll have me." Luke pulled them both into his arms, his voice thick. "Then we're a family." And as the church bell tolled in the distance, Mary knew her prayer had been answered. She had come only to cook for a wealthy rancher, but God had given her back something far richer. A home. A child's laughter. A man's steadfast love.